Την προσοχή σας και λίγο έτσι να δημιουργήσουμε μία όμορφη ησυχία για τον επόμενο ομιλητή μας. Mr. MacArthur Scott, and he's going to talk about the employee experience in the digital age, and the digital world seems a safer world for the things we were talking about before. Okay. Mr. MacArthur has 3 key words in his CV that I read. He talks about passion, he talks about wit, and rock and roll. And I'm really interested to listen to what he has to say or sing to us. Welcome. You don't need this, you have your own.
I don't think I'll be doing much rock and roll, unfortunately. Now, you may already have gathered that I am Scottish. And I struggle with English, never mind Greek. So please bear with me, and I hope you find this interesting. Many years ago, when I was growing up near Glasgow in Scotland, there was a television show very famous in the UK called Tomorrow's World. And it used to make predictions about where we were going. And one of the predictions they made was that in 2020, I'd be going to work like that. So unless you know something that I don't know, I think this is very unlikely. But what it does teach you is that it's actually quite embarrassing to predict the future. And I do not see myself as a futurist. However, I am going to have a think about it with you, about the things I think could happen and could help to improve the employee experience. Does that make sense? Yeah? You're allowed to talk to me. Does that make sense? Yes. That's better. Right. Now, I grew up, as I said, in Scotland, and I took this photograph earlier this year. This is a mountain in Scotland called Siúrna which is that's a Gaelic phrase, and it's in an island called Skye. It's a beautiful part of the country. And you might notice that there's some fog, there's some cloud cover at the top of the mountain. And I think that's one of the big challenges we face in HR. I spent 15 years as an HR director. I am now in full recovery. However, I have a lot of resonance with what you people do. But I think there's things out there in the environment that hide the future from us. And one of them is so obvious that it's almost comical. And it's said a lot at conferences. I'm going to say it because I think we have to start with it. The pace of change, a lot of folks say, the pace of change today is the fastest it's ever been. Yeah, easy to say. But I think there's a second part to this that makes it even more challenging. There's a but. And that but is that if today's pace of change keeps going the way it's going, it will never be this slow again. So think on that. It's only going to get faster. It's not going to suddenly slow down. And that's one of the major challenges that we face in human resources and in general leadership. And I would think in the next 20 years, it's going to be one of the biggest challenges that we face in our lives. And I've got some clues and some ideas that I hope will help you with that and how to deal with it. So how do you prepare for this? How do you predict what the future might be? I say I'm not a futurist, so where do we start? Well, this all really started for me 30 years ago. This is me. I was 23 when that picture was taken. And that ape, it's a baboon, she was called Amanda. And Amanda was one of my projects when I was doing a PhD in pathology. And I was given Amanda by a zoo when she died of old age. And I spent 18 months boiling her down, taking all the blood and all the muscle off her, and I rebuilt her with a little drill and some wire. And when I left the university, they wouldn't give me Amanda. So poor Amanda is still in the anatomy department at Edinburgh University. But that was the beginning for me of really being interested in evidence. Because scientists, one of the things they are very keen on is looking for evidence. So that was the start of my journey. And oddly, in the last few days, I've just started working at a zoo in the United Kingdom. I'm the zoo ambassador for Twycross Zoo. And what we're looking at there is how do we use zoos to support conservation? And I've already started to push the zoo for more evidence. I don't like zoos, but I've already started to push them to say, where's the evidence that this is the right thing to be doing for the primate population we have in our zoo? It's the biggest in Europe. So this has been through my whole life, and this is where I begin the day, because I think it's important that you understand that that's where I come from, because some of the things I'm going to say might surprise you, given that context. When you look at human history and you look at human development, there are many, many things that have changed, but there are many, many things that haven't changed. Now, this is from the Chauvet Cave in France. It's a very famous picture. But as human beings, we were 50,000 generations as wildlife. So you were running around naked, being chased by tigers or whatever, for 50,000 generations. Can you guess how many generations we've been, arrogantly, modern people? Can you guess how many generations it is? Say again? 100? It's a bit more than that. Thank you for playing. We've been modern humans for 500 generations. So we were wildlife for 50,000 generations, and we've been modern humans for 500 generations. A generation is about 25 to 30 years. Do the maths, it works. That means that we haven't changed. I mean, you do not evolve in 500 generations. We are basically the same as we were when we were wildlife. And one of the things that jumps out from the research and the evidence is something very important. If something is socially valuable to us, we like it. If something is socially valuable to you, we like it. We always seek, we're tribal animals. We like to be in groups. We like to be in relationships, etc. So all that together, the evidence background and the fact that we have not changed in the last 500 generations, basically sets the scene for what I'm going to say for the rest of this session. Does that make sense? Yeah? You with me? Right, thank you. Now, the other thing that's important, and I'm not going to preach you on this, but there's things that we know are happening in the environment that are going to change our jobs. One of them is that there's a lot of jobs going to go, and most of those jobs are likely to be around knowledge work. Anything that's linear, anything that's procedural is going to go. I've seen it across the world with legal companies basically falling apart because artificial intelligences can already do a better job than paralegals. So that world is changing, and I see no reason why it wouldn't continue to change. And again, yeah, that makes sense. But I'd like us to take it to a different level. And I'm going to do that by a bit of fun, first of all. I'm going to ask you to do something for me, just to get you warmed up. Because you know what they call this slot after lunch in the speaking world? They call it the graveyard shift. So I want you to wake up. What I'd like you to do is turn to the person or the persons next to you. It doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 of you. And I want you to think about your life at work. And I want you to compare that to a movie. What movie represents your life at work today? Go. Come on. Okay. Thank you. Give us an example. Give me an example, sir. Forrest Gump. Right, very good. Yes. Braveheart. Freedom. Yeah, very good. Your one. The Fast and the Furious. That's HR. You work at it. Yeah. Now that exercise may seem trivial, but you know what? I've been working with artificial intelligences for the last 15 years. And artificial intelligences do not ask what I call beautiful questions. That's a beautiful question. And I was speaking at Barclays, you know, the bank, a couple of weeks ago. And there was 150 15-year-olds in the room. Can you imagine that? And I asked them to do that exercise. And so I probably got a bit emotional because it was quite an emotional experience. You wouldn't believe what happened. There was one girl was with her friend. And I walked up to them and I said, how are you doing? What's your film? And she looked at me right in the eye and she said, oh, my film's Shrek. And I was like, oh. The reason I went, oh, was this girl was that shape. She said, I look like Shrek. Exactly. But this is the magic, and this is where the employee experience comes in. Her friend was a little girl, 15-year-old little girl, very small girl. And she turned around and she said, "You're not Shrek, you're an Avenger." Right? So that pure human experience, that type of experience can come from those types of questions. Now, I can't go on about questions today, but maybe in the future I'll get to talk to you about beautiful questions. There's a poet called Rilke that I'm very fond of. If you've never heard of Rilke, he said, you should love the questions, and that was one of the questions that I love. My favourite film for today, Terminator. And it's one of these images that you get about artificial intelligence. And again, if any of you work in AI, you know it's nothing like that. I mean, we're decades away from this sort of nonsense. However, what we're not decades away from, zoom in on the sort of 2001 eye, I think what we have is the rise of the algorithms, not of the dangerous robots. Now, you might know what an algorithm is. It's basically a process, a mathematical process. Bear that in mind. It's really important, that the rise of the algorithms, because it's algorithms that will take our jobs, and it's algorithms we have to think about. The context, though, is quite scary. Now, we don't have Arnie running around shooting people, but what we don't have is any control over artificial intelligence at the moment. What we have is a bunch of vendors trying to make money from you and telling you that you need their artificial intelligences. That's bollocks, right? We need to change that relationship. We need governments and we need individuals to start taking control of this, or it's not going to go well. Yeah, it is not going to go well. There's not a government in the world at the moment is legislating for AI in terms of ethics and morality. There is a thing in the American Senate right now by a chap called Tristram Harris, and Tristram is trying very, very hard to get the Trump government to start talking about ethics. Good luck, Tristram. There's a lot of work to be done on that. But that means a whole lot of things. And I think one of the things that's really important for you as a group of HR professionals, it's time for you to make a decision. And as Ben said earlier, and I thought he was quite right, there's something about today that could be a massive moment for the HR profession. And I think it centres on one thing: data. Yeah? We have more data now than we've ever had, and I'll come back to that in a sec. But there's something about a relationship with data that I think could be a huge opportunity, but it might not be what you think it is. There's this quite famous saying that, and I've believed this since I was in the laboratories cutting up dead bodies, that if you don't have data, you're just another person with an opinion. Yeah? So if you don't have data, you're just another person with an opinion. So I've thought about that for years, and in the last couple of years, we've created more data than we have in the rest of human history. So it's fascinating, isn't it? There's just data everywhere. But that has brought some challenges. And I think that the best metaphor I've seen about this was an academic in America taught me this, that data is a bit like oil. Used to be, it's a bit like oil, and that oil is everything behind the digital workplace. But I've worked in the oil industry, and I know that when you pull oil out of the ground, it's crude. It's a mess. It needs to be purified, it needs to be cleaned, it needs to be made into its constituent parts. And many, many companies don't understand that. And the best example was recently with Amazon. I don't know if you've heard the story. They developed one of the most sophisticated AIs in the world, and it was found out that it was a racist, bigamist, misogynist AI, and was only recruiting men with grey hair and discounting women. Whoops. So that, again, vendors are selling things to you, they're telling you they work, they don't. Challenge your vendors, and I will come back to this later. Even the ones in the room, I challenge you to talk to me about this, because there's an awful lot of crude data out there that I think is causing us lots of problems. The other thing that's happening, and this is a big challenge for you guys, is that in the marketplace now, you see things like personalised clothing, personalised food. I was speaking at an AI conference a few weeks ago in Stockholm, and one of the predictions that the tech companies are making is next Christmas, the big gift that everyone will be wanting is a pizza printer. So you're even going to be able to buy personalised pizzas and print them in your own house. If you don't believe me, have Google pizza printer. You will not believe what they're doing in that space. And because the technology is developing so quickly, that's the next thing that's going to happen. Really fancy, eh? But that is how they're using some of this technology at the moment. But I think this one size no longer, it just doesn't work anymore. So at the moment, in my HR career, I did agreements with trade unions. I was doing contracts for people. People are wanting personalised things out of work, and we're not giving them it in work. I think that is a serious, serious challenge for everyone in the room. Because I think in what's coming now, people will want their own contract. People will want their own type of menu of benefits, whatever. So there's a huge challenge here. Companies will not get away with giving people a set of terms and conditions. It's not going to prevail. I think it's one of the sure things I think I would put my mortgage on, and yours, that this is going to change. So this is what the first really big thing for HR, I think. But that links to something else. And again, this might hurt some of you. I think we're coming very close to the end of best practice. I think it's very, very close. Because, okay, if I'm buying a payroll system, I might use best practice. Would I do that for a performance management system? No, I would not. And I know some of you probably sell best practice in performance management, but I think this is under great threat. I don't think employees are going to accept it anymore, and I would caution you against best practice. I really would caution you against it. Have you ever felt like that? You ever felt like that? This was done with me and a friend. We were working with Amazon, and this is how the staff feel at Amazon. These wee guys up the top here, these are the devils that turn the screw with data. And this is where I'm going to change my angle on this a little bit that you might not have expected, because I think data is part of the problem moving forward. It's not only important, it's part of the problem. I think many of us are now suffering from digital fatigue. Just about had enough of it. I did a TEDx talk on this about a month ago. And to try and explain that to the audience, which was a young audience, again, I sat with my artist friends, and I thought, what do we do with this? And I remember, do you know who this guy is? Warren Buffett, amazing character, and a real interesting man. And I had the pleasure of sharing a stage with Warren in Vegas last year. And one of the questions was, it was a brilliant question. Someone said from the audience, it wasn't me unfortunately, but someone said, what's the biggest challenge in business today, Warren? And in his usual American drawl, he said, just like that, he said, it's people checking people, checking people, checking people. We run our organizations by checking our own people rather than thinking about the experience they're having. And that took me to a place, and that place was thinking about, what do we do at work that's helping or hurting people? And I think there's a toxin in our organizations. Some of you will have worked it out already. This toxin is everywhere, and this toxin is crippling organizations. And this toxin is KPIs. The world has gone KPI bananas. And you need to measure. I remember, I'm a scientist. I like data. But companies are now, they've lost sight of it and they've gone too far. And what happens with KPIs is that you strangle your organization, you strangle your people. And I think it's a huge mistake, an absolute huge mistake. I'm working with some major retailers across Europe at the moment to try and get them to basically bin their KPIs and start again. Start again and measure things that need measuring, not just measuring things because the vendor gives you a nice bit of kit that will measure things for you. It's a real threat to the future because you will not create a workplace of the future if you keep going down the KPI route. Measurement is not everything. Do you love your mum? Prove it. Not easy to prove, but you know it's true. So a lot of the things that we need to think about now as HR professionals cannot be measured. Welcome back to the 1970s. We're almost going back the way to go forward, back to the future. I think we'll need to do that, but I'll give you some clues on what I think we can do there. I call my approach radical simplicity. There's a company that I work with in the UK. It's a shoe retailer. They're one of the biggest in the UK. And the chief executive there epitomizes this. And I was having a drink with them recently. And I said, company values. I'm a bit uncomfortable with values sometimes. I think they're a bit boring. But I said to him, how do you run your company? He said, dead easy. I tell my people they have to look the part. Interesting discussion on uniforms earlier. You have to look the part and put the money in the till. That's it. And he trusts them. That's how he runs his whole company. Took out all the SAP tills and bought 4,000 Victorian tills to demonstrate to his people that he trusted them. And it's flying, that organisation. That organisation has got more ex-cons in it, criminals, than any other company in the world. And his attrition rate, wait for it, 2%. Because he trusts them. And they like it. They love working there. So think about radical simplicity. And to help with that, I was thinking about it. I thought, well, what can I'm going to give you a key performance indicator. But this is a good one. It's so good that I call this the golden KPI. And this is not just for work. This is for your personal life. So I expect to see some things in your fridges at home measuring this. This KPI is critical to you because it reflects everything that's important in your life. Everything. And that everything is time well spent. So if you're not doing something that is good time, use of your time, don't do it. Do you know how many days we live for on average? Have a guess. Somebody get the calculator out. It's 28,000 days. 28,000 days. You sleep for half of that, 14,000 days. After you take out shopping, you take out cleaning, gardening, hopefully making love occasionally, etc., etc. Do you know what you're left with for your whole life? 6,000 days. 3,200 of them are spent at work. 2,800 are for you. If you're over 30, you've only got 3,000 days left. Say again? Talk to me offline, yeah? But that's why time well spent is so important. So again, when I go into clients and I say, how are we structuring our time? How are we structuring our business? If it's not time well spent, including my talk today, get out. Because it's a waste of your time, and I would not do that to you. So a company that understands the employee experience has to think about that KPI. Is every moment time well spent? Because if it's not, make sense? Thank you. Now, the other thing that's happening as a consequence of all of this is that we're being distracted. And I think that the issue of focus is important, and the big issue is we're surrounded by what I call weapons of mass distraction. Guess what they are? Yeah? And when I did this for my TEDx, what I did was I thought, well, the kids, remember I said earlier that I was doing it with a lot of children? So I went to Greek language, and I came up with a monster that's lurking in the background every day, the chronophage. Now, I can't say that in Greek, and the barman in the pub last night was trying to teach me how to say chronophage in Greek. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I tried. But that is going on behind you all the time. Now, remember earlier I said there was all this unregulated, they were just doing what the vendors were doing what they like. These people are masters at grabbing your attention and distracting you. And if you're distracted, you're not focused, and if you're not focused, you're not at your best. And if you're going to design a workplace for the future, you've got to think about focus. You've got to worry about the chronophage and kill the sod. Yeah? It's a huge challenge for us all. I mean, I'm not anti-technology, but I am anti-bad technology. And I think that is a huge issue in our workplaces today. The other thing that happens is, of course, all this stuff coming towards you makes you stupid because it stresses you. You know that someone who's under pressure doesn't perform at their best. Well, the evidence here is that if you're distracted all the time and you can't concentrate, you're stupid. So any CEO who's worth her weight at all will understand if you go to her and say, we need to think about how distracted our people is because it just makes them stupid. The return on investment can't be measured. It's not enormous, but it can't be measured. I wouldn't waste my time on measuring it. However, it's a dialogue that you can legitimately have with your chief executive. You need to think about how do we make things less distracting in this workplace of the future. Now, this is for the parents in the room, and I've got 4 children, and one of my talks is called this: if you are always on, you are never present. If you are always on, you are never present. And I'm writing a children's book at the moment about the chronophage, and the final image in the book is a father sitting, my emotions are going, is a father sitting at his laptop, looking over the event horizon, the top of the laptop, and his grown-up daughter is leaving the room. He's missed her growing up. That's what we're doing to ourselves. That's what we're allowing these companies to do to us. And in my TED Talk, I talk about we need a free will rebellion. You know, we need to change the way the relationship we have with technology. And I think as HR professionals, you can take a significant step towards that in the workplace by turning that down and actually enriching people's lives. And again, enriching people's lives can't be measured. But for the future and the workplace that we really want, I think that should be on your agenda. Now, attention is going to be where the money is as well. The other thing that's happening, which is really interesting, I mean, time is money. And I am working with some advertisers who are now talking about paying people to watch commercials. Paying people to watch commercials. Why? Because they want those people's attention so that they can sell them their products. It actually makes complete sense. So again, I can see in the next 5 years, not 10, I can see in the next 5 years going to the cinema early and being paid to watch some commercials. Next Christmas, I know it's happening in the UK. It's a big step for companies, but because of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which you may know about or may not, doesn't matter, we'll be able to get little pings in our pocket with micro euros paid into your account for watching an advert. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's quite an interesting thought, I think, that it could come towards us. The other things that's happening in the market, and these are things that I would imagine you're already aware of, disciplines like meditation are becoming more and more popular. The evidence is still, it's not conclusive, but it's getting interesting all the time. I call meditation focused attention. And I now use that as part of my daily practice, and it's something that I would encourage you all to think about and think about in your companies. But the next one is a bit more challenging. You know Elon Musk? Heard of Elon Musk? Taking us to Mars. Bit of a pillock, but he's taking us to Mars. He's got another business, just as big as the space business. And that business is dealing with these things. Performance-enhancing drugs at work. They're called nootropics. This is a huge movement. It's counterintuitive to many of us. It sounds, oh, wait a minute, you're not advocating people taking drugs. They are. I've been using them myself for a year. Interesting. But it's very low dose. It's not high dose. You're not going to get high or anything. But it's things like psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, MDMA, which is ecstasy. These are all being used in microdoses to help people focus. Children in America, 70% of kids in America are now using nootropics when they're doing their exams. In the United Kingdom, the figure's about 20%. This is coming whether you like it or not. It cannot be stopped because it's legal. It's coming. You go onto Amazon right now and type in nootropics and there are hundreds of products will appear. One tip, don't buy any of the ones that have got caffeine in them because all you get is a caffeine high. You're not actually getting any benefit, so be careful when you buy them. But here's a challenge for you. In the next 5 years, could you become the corporate chemist? You're trying to get people to perform. This is one way of improving their performance. Now, whether you agree with it or not, I don't really care. But this is a potential future that's coming, and it's coming very, very fast over the hill. If you want to read a book on it, I can recommend one after I've finished speaking. If you want to come up and talk to me about it, you can read it. So could you be the corporate chemist? There's a job title. Right, now the final thing that I think is a huge opportunity is something that I've experienced myself on very few occasions. I was speaking in Stockholm the other day, and I went to the Nobel Science Prize Museum. And there was some research done there by a chap called Russell, who looked at the success of Nobel Science Prize winners over the last 100 years. And there was a theme, but rather than tell you the theme directly, I'm going to do it indirectly. I'm going to tell you a final story. We're living in India, and we're living in a village. And this is a very odd village, because everyone in the village is blind. And one day, something walks into the village. And the kids go running to the elders. They're all men, of course. They go running to the elders and they say, there's something in the village, there's something in the village. Now remember, they're all blind. So 4 of the elders come out to try and find out what this is that's walked into the village. The first one starts at the business end and grabs hold of the tail and is like, what's that? It's long, it's got a furry bit, it's a brush. The second one goes to the leg and he puts his arms around it and he goes, it's hard, it's tall, it's a tree. The third one, you can see where this is going now, can't you? The third one reaches up and feels this massive wall-like thing. It's a wall. And then the fourth one goes to this bit here and says, oh, it's made of ceramic, and it's sharp, it's a spear. That, in organizations, could change your organization fundamentally if you understand that. I'll explain it in a minute. First time I did a TEDx, I've done a few of these now, was in Warwick in the UK. And I had the experience that changed my life. The talk was okay, but after it, there was a dinner. And I was sat there getting feedback from a sex therapist, from an opera singer, from a nanobot expert, from a prison guard from California, from an AI expert, from a biologist, telling me about my talk. And I realized then that I'd never really quite understood that parable. I thought multidisciplinary thinking was about involving marketing, HR, and finance. No, it's not. Real multidisciplinary thinking is about introducing something into your organization that, again, can't be measured. And that thing, I'm not even sure this is a word, and that thing is interestingness. Because people say to me, people don't concentrate for any more than 15 minutes. People can't do X, can't do Y. If someone is interesting, you'll watch them for hours. Yeah? If you can engage your people by being interesting, that's why I talk about rock and roll. Because people go, really? Because it's just another part of my life that I bring into the workplace. And you know what? People love it. So becoming a storyteller, telling them how interesting you are is a key point. And don't say to me, I've got no stories. I've got nothing interesting in my life. Oh, yes, you have. But you have to become an archaeologist of your own life to get interesting. I was telling someone earlier, they asked me how I did my speeches. I've done over 100 this year. So physically, I couldn't do that without having a process. So my process is basically, I'm an archaeologist of my own life, and I've got 400 stories on my phone that I've gathered in the last 18 months. If you want me to do a talk at your business, I take the best stories from that. Voila, I've got my talk. Yeah? But I've spent a year and a half being an archaeologist of my own life. But think about it. How can your company be more interesting? Because interestingness, people love it and they're drawn to it. The other thing that I think needs to start happening, and it's something that's not pilot studies, is companies need to adopt another scientific principle, which is doing experiments. I'm working with a bank at the moment. It's quite brave of them. It's a 5-year program, and we're using 3 different performance management systems in the one company. Imagine doing that in your company. Right? So one group have no performance management system, and the other two, one group has the old-fashioned performance management by torture, the Gaussian distribution performance management bonus type thing, and the other group is having a group performance management scheme. And we're just looking to see which one works best for that culture. But you can't do that in 3 months. You can't do that in a year. You've got to do it in 3 or 4 years, or it's not going to be scientifically valid. Companies are really going to struggle with that, but I don't care. If companies want to know how to create a future that's going to work for people, they need to think differently. And introducing experiments into your business is a critical thing that you should be thinking about, in my opinion, certainly. Now, this is a hero of mine. He's a guy called Ken Robinson. And Ken really brings all this beautifully together. If you wanted me to tell you the best 10 presentations I've ever seen, the top 5 are all Ken Robinson. That's how much I rate this guy. He's an absolutely outstanding presenter. And he said this, he said, human resources are a bit like natural resources. Human resources are a bit like natural resources. Sometimes you've got to dig deep to find them. Sometimes you've got to dig deep to find them. Isn't that very clever? And that pushes over on me. What I get from that is, people used to say I do soft skills. Soft skills are not soft at all. They are actually the really, really hard skills. And I think the future is in that space. AIs won't be doing authenticity or ethics, or, it's down to us. And I think as a profession, there's an opportunity for us to grab this. I really do believe that. And one of the things I believe is that we need tools to do that. And hopefully I've given you some things to think about in terms of tools in the last half an hour. Now, the final big bit, if you like, is this. I think the heroic leader, the star leader, has got no time left. I think it's the end of an era. We don't need Steve Jobs anymore. We need a different type of leader. And I've been thinking about that, and you may have spotted a theme throughout my presentation. I think the leader of the future needs to be like a gardener. Completely different mindset, not looking to show off and show how important they are, but looking to nurture, test, fertilize, etc. the people. That doesn't sound very good, does it? Sound a bit rude? But looking to help people rather than telling them what to do. Could you be a gardener in your organization? Or do you need to be one of them with one superpower? Think about it. It can change the way you frame your whole organization if you start to think like that. And I think the best CEOs in the future are going to be gardeners. I'm virtually certain of that. Virtually certain of it. Now, I started with this statement, and I hope some of you have already worked out that I think this statement is only limited. I think there needs to be something added to it, so I've done that. I made it into what they call a dual statement. It's a yin and yang type statement, because I believe that if all you have is data, you're just another algorithm. And remember Arnie earlier? If it's algorithms, what happens? You get outsourced to an AI. Human robotics, indeed, from earlier. So think about that. If you go too far with the data and you don't get into the things that are not measurable, I think your jobs are limited in terms of time. Think about that when you leave today. Am I driving myself out of work, and am I happy with that? And I don't think that's appropriate for an HR professional to be thinking like that. So, to end, if you get your cameras out, get your phones out, come on. Do this for me. You ever seen one of these? Hold your camera up, you don't need an app, it'll do it automatically. Just point it at that, just point it. And what you'll find is a little link will appear at the top of your phone. Touch it, and that'll take you to my YouTube channel. Now, I'm not selling anything on there. This is all material that I gather for my clients. I do a mini documentary series on there. And I try to do little documentaries that are only 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, and hopefully you'll find some of that inspiring. Now, I think I'll be able to give the pack to the group afterwards, so if that doesn't work for you, it should work on every phone. There's a couple of Androids it doesn't work on, but all the Apple devices it works on. Is it working? Yes, yeah, no, yeah. Next. There's two, both my TEDx talks are on there. Thank you. Can I just say one more thing? One more thing. This won't surprise you. I hope you found that interesting. And guess what? I hope it was time well spent. I hope it was time well spent. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much.
That was my cheesy attempt at doing Greek. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can say that, you were like a nootropic for us after lunch.
A nootropic.
Yeah. And I want to pick up some keywords from all the speeches that we heard today. We heard about meaning, truth, a nice working environment, happiness, trust.
Yeah.
And I want to send a very positive Christmas message to everybody that all of these keywords are inside us, and we need to dig deep, like archaeologists, to bring it on surface and have a meaningful life.
Absolutely right.
Perfect.
Absolutely right.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Mr. MacArthur?
Scott, please. Mr. MacArthur's my dad.
Okay. For Scott.
Any questions?
Okay.
Nope.
You left everyone speechless.
Okay.
Okay.